This is the Western Abenaki corn mother story. This is told during our harvest celebrations to give the kids an idea of what it took in order to be able to eat and have food and to be sustainable. Part of this, we use the remnants of the corn to make corn dolls so the kids have something to play with all year round during the winter time. As the earth started to be populated with more and more Abenaki people, there were more and more resources that were starting to be depleted. So more of the Abenaki people were going hungry. There was this one family, the mother and the father tried to comfort their children by trying to find food for them to eat, but sometimes that was just impossible. So they were hungry. So they would start to cry, and then the next night cry. So they would just be crying because they were so hungry. Well, after a while, that began to bother the mother and the father because they felt they couldn't provide for their children. Eventually, the mother said, I'm going to go talk to the Creator. Maybe He can help us because we need to find a way to sustain ourselves. So she went to the Creator and she said, Creator, my children are hungry. I need to feed our children. What can we do? And He goes, well, you know that in order to get something, you have to give something. What do you have to give for such a sustainable gift for your people? And she said, well, I have nothing to give. And He said, well, when you think about it and you find something to give, come back and we'll have another discussion. So she went back, and her children started crying again that night out of hunger. And she started thinking about it, and she said, I know what I have to do. Like any mother who would give their life for their children, she went to the Creator and said, all I have is my life. I'm willing to offer my life. That is a gift that is worthy of such an ask. You are in this as a partnership. You need to speak to your husband and make sure he is okay with this too. So the wife went back to her husband and said, look, our children are hungry. I'm willing to give my life so that way they may feed if you will take care of our children and make sure that they are okay. And he, like any husband, he's like, well, I love you. I don't want to lose you. I need to go speak to the Creator. So he went to the Creator and he said, look, why does my wife have to give her life in order for us to eat? And he said, she is the giver of life. She carries the water inside her. She is the one responsible for carrying on generations because she is the only one that can give birth. You need to respect her, and that is her place. If she wants to do that, then you have to respect that. So he said, begrudgingly, okay, I'll accept it. I don't like it, but I'll accept it. So he went back and he told his wife that he would accept the fact that she is willing to give her life so that way her children may live. So now they had to prepare for this. So she summoned her sisters from the various villages, her other two sisters, to come to help her husband take care of the children when she was gone. When everybody was prepared, she went to the Creator and she gave her life for her children. Her husband picked up his wife, weeping, and carried her through the field. And he laid her in the field, and he buried her, and he cried over her. He cried over her for 4 days. On the fourth day, the children and the sisters came up and said, you can't stay here. You have to go home. And he said, okay. So for the next 3 days, he brought fish to his wife and buried it in the mounds because that was her favorite meal. He wanted her to continue to eat and have food because that was his wife. On the seventh day, he went up and he saw two things growing from the mound. And he goes, oh my God, what's happening? And he was like, I need to pull these up. And his wife said, stop. I am not gone, my husband. I have transitioned. I didn't die, I transitioned. I'm fulfilling the prophecy that I asked the Creator for to feed our children throughout time. This plant that is growing out of the mound will grow. And as it grows, you will see my ears start to form. And my hair will be the flowy hair that I always have. And as I get bigger, when my hair turns black, that is fulfilling the prophecy that my children will eat throughout time and never go hungry again. And he looked in amazement. The corn is you, a reincarnation of you, and you will continue to nourish our children like you did when they were born. He goes, well, what is this other plant? And she goes, because I never want any of my children to ever give their life for a prayer again. This is tobacco. This will be grown so that way when you harvest it, you can take that tobacco and offer it to the Creator for a prayer and receive that prayer back. So my children will never have to give their life. I've already done that. This tobacco is for those prayers. So we grow tobacco as part of our prayer giving, and why we give it to ask for prayers, and why we smoke it in the pipe. That replaced Kinnick, because that is the second iteration of those the offerings of sacrifice for our people. Year after year, she would grow, they would collect the seeds, and they would cherish them because that was their wife and their mother. They would cherish these seeds, and they would nourish themselves and their bodies with it, and then they would plant it again in that ritual offering to remember the sacrifice the mother gave so they could always grow and always eat. The sisters would always go up year after year and help attend to the gardens. And this one sister was really loving. She would really love and hug you and squeeze you. And she said when she passed away, she wanted to be buried with her sister so that way she could hug her again and always be in relationship with her sister. So when she passed away, they brought her up and buried her in a mound, and she became beans. And she started to grow up her sister in a perpetual hugging motion. And she would stretch out her arms to be able to hug whatever is near her. And those were pole beans that would do that. So that third sister was always beating off the rodents that were up there trying to eat her sisters, because who doesn't want to eat beans or corn, right? So when she passed on, she said, I'm going to come back and still protect my sisters. So I'm going to be squash, and I'm going to surround my sisters because I'm going to guard them. And I'm going to have picky leaves and stuff so that way the rodents won't come in because it'll be picky and they won't like it. When she was buried, she became squash, and she surrounded her sisters in perpetual protection of her sisters. So that's where the corn, beans, and squash come in, and the Three Sisters Mound Gardens come in. And most people want to know, well, what happened to the husband? Well, as the husband, year after year, continued to bring her fish because that was her favorite meal. So when he crossed over, he wanted to be an osprey because that is the fish eagle. We don't plant our crops until the osprey comes and starts to nest on the waters because we know the fish is available, and he is the bird that carries the fish and continues to drop them on the sides of the riverbanks, and that's where we grew our corn, along the riverbanks, along the fertile floodplains. So that osprey was the husband that became part of that planting season. And of course, the female daughters wanted to be with their mother and their sisters. So as they started to pass away, they became other plants that are part of the Seven Sisters Gardens, which is the Jerusalem artichoke, the sunflower, and other types of plants that make up the Seven Sisters Gardens. So the females, the women of the children, became the other crops that became part of that whole Seven Sisters Garden. So then people wonder, well, what happened to the boys? That's where the bird of prey come in. So as the children of that corn mother passed on, they became the owls to hunt at night, to keep the rodents off the gardens, the hawks that help keep the mice and the rodents out from the daytime. So that way they would always do the job of that sister who was always protecting their mother and their sisters. So they would now become the protectors of the gardens by eating the rodents who were trying to eat their mother and their aunts. And the father was providing the fish still through the osprey. So that is the Three Sisters Garden original, and then the Seven Sisters that expand on it, and how we use the osprey in our green corn ceremonies and our planting ceremonies with the sun and the moon and the rain and the osprey. We use the osprey feathers for those ceremonies to symbolize that harvest and that part of that story, and why the bird of prey are helping to protect those gardens and the Seven Sisters. So it goes beyond just a Three Sisters mound garden. It goes the whole ethnobotany around our green corn ceremony. There is a song that goes with the green corn ceremony, and that goes like, Yonigawe, Yonigawe, Yahani Gawe. Yonigawe, Yonigawe, Yahani Gawe. That is the sacrifice. And then it goes, O largwe, kwe hai hai wanehu, O largwe, kwe hai hai wanehu, O largwe, kwe hai hai wanehu, O largwe, kwe hai hai wanehu. And that's during the growing piece. So you got the sacrifice and the growing piece. Well, now it comes time for harvest and the victory song, right? So it goes, Yanne ho, yanne, yanne ho, yanne ho, yanne, yanne ho, yanne ho, yanne. So the song that goes with this whole harvest festival is the sacrifice, the growing of the crop, and then the victory song, or now it's ready to eat. That is the fulfillment of the prophecy. So now you have the story, you have the song, and then we act out the actual ceremony of how it came to be every year during a harvest festival. So we bring in people and we sing that song, and we bring them out into this field. And then we have the sun and the moon that are going during the song. And you have the thunder sticks for the rain. And then we have an elder there, and a child walks up and grabs the corn and asks the elder if it's ready to eat. She either says no or yes, and they put it back on, and then it repeats itself again, the sun, the moon, the rain, and the growing and the song, until the child picks it up and the elder says yes, and then the victory song is sung. So now you have the story, you have the song, and you have the play, or the acting out of the story. So all of that combined together is our green corn ceremony with the green corn story that's done at the Harvest Festival. That is a celebration of all of the food that we are thankful for after the harvest. And we have this big dinner and we trade with other people. Like you may have more corn and they may have more squash, and you trade. So everybody eats equally, and they take that into their cash stores so that way they can, throughout the winter, they'll have nutritious food to eat and carbohydrates that'll help sustain their body forever. That's how we became from hunter-gatherers to growers, and how we became self-sustainable as a people. And as you know, corn is used throughout the world for everything. And that prophecy has held true for all human beings from the beginning of when it was given to us until now. And part of why we look at that corn, it's not just a seed. When we hold a corn or bean seed in our hand, we are touching thousands of our ancestors who cared for that piece of seed in order for us to get it into our hand. If any one of those would have thrown it away, we wouldn't have it. So we are touching the original sacrifice, the gift from the Creator to our corn mother, the growing, and thousands of our ancestors who cared for those seeds in order for us to have it today. Then we ask our children, what would you do with this seed? Would you plant it, throw it away, or give it to someone who will carry on that legacy? That's the importance of the seeds. That's the importance of our spiritual view of how that gift, that sacrifice, and how our food systems all relate to each other. So thank you for listening to the Western Abenaki green corn mother story.